Hey guys, welcome back. I'm Dana Davis, and today we're going to turn ordinary toilet paper into extraordinary sculpture. So let's get started. Okay, here's what I chose to make, but there's tons of different options, and I'll show some examples throughout this video. Go ahead and grab your water and your toilet paper, and that's all you'll need for this first step. Layering the tissue paper is very important. I'm going to walk you through how many layers I use for the bacon. So now that I have my layers, I'm going to go ahead and spritz it with water. I really like applying the water this way. I do have a little yogurt container over here for like dipping my hands in if I need it. I don't think I ever even used it. So I'm just patting it out. It's nice and damp, but if I were to actually squeeze it to try to wring it out, I couldn't get any water to drip off of it. So that's the type of moisture amounts we're talking about here. Now, because I'm making bacon and it is organic, I don't need it to keep a rectangle. I need it to look a little more uneven, a little less predictable. So that's why I'm using this tear method. And I would use this for lettuce, popcorn, anything in that category that's a little more unpredictable in nature. Another little squirt just to get it to kind of stick together. Now, it's not going to hold its perfect shape that we establish here because we are going to paint it. It's kind of re-wets when you paint it. So I'm going to give it a nice little wrinkle here and there and kind of squish it up a little and set it aside, and then knowing that it probably is not going to hold that shape perfectly, but that's a good little shape. Do not do this. Squeeze, 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 squeeze. No, no, no. It's too predictable. Bacon doesn't do that. So we're going to really study what it really does and make it a little bit uneven, a little asymmetrical. All right, yep, we like that. Looks good. Now I want 2 pieces of bacon, so I'm gonna set this aside and I'm gonna make another piece. While I do that, I want to tell you that if you are doing this project and you're finding that your food item is falling apart, it may be that you need a few more layers. Maybe the tissue you're using isn't as thick. So keep that in mind. All right, if you can make a slice of bacon, then you can do a lot with this project because we are done with that piece and we don't want to make it look identical to the other one. Some of the food items like this egg are going to be what I define as compound sculptures. So there's 2 pieces and then we fuse them together. So I'm going to start with the yolk. And I'm just gonna basically put a ball of toilet paper that doesn't have a lot of water in it because I want to keep, I don't know, the fluffiness, that nature. And if I get it too wet or too thick, it's not going to dry out and it may even mold. So the yolk is basically done. I feel pretty good about the basic shape of that. Now I'm gonna try out some sizes of the white of the egg. Remember, we want several layers and we don't want to leave it all uniform because that toilet paper has that perforated edge and it's going to want to break. So this, I'm just sitting the yolk on top of this to try it on kind of like that, just to see if it's going to be the right ratio. Again, I just tear it. I don't cut it with scissors. It doesn't work well anyway. I tear it to get a more organic feel. Just gonna fill my yolk up a little bit. Sometimes you'll notice if you spray it, the toilet paper just gets more dense and collapses. So you really want to fill it up. Now I'm basically creating a veil of toilet paper or tissue over the yolk and the white, fusing them together. You'll see I'm just kind of like patting. I'm using my fingertips to mold it out. It's really malleable, so you can shape it pretty easily. You can see that this egg is starting to appear. One more layer. You can see I just kind of folded it back on itself. Again, getting rid of the wrinkles is probably the hardest thing to do. It does want to wrinkle. Always keep a good color reference handy for each item that you're sculpting. Make sure the color is good, it's not too dark or shadowy, or maybe even used filters on. Just a really good, clean image. You'll need that, and you'll use it a lot if you're paying close attention. I say this a lot during this project. If it's easy to sculpt, it tends to be really difficult to paint, and vice versa. So this piece of toast was not the most difficult item to sculpt. I basically made a square, ripped off some pieces, and it was done as far as sculpting. But when it came to painting, it was the hardest item to paint and get looking even close to natural. So be sure and consider both legs of this race, so to speak. Think about sculpting and painting. If you don't paint it convincingly, it won't matter how good your proportion is on sculpting. It won't come across. It won't translate. And I keep layering this bread because it continues to collapse and condense and get flat. And I don't really want it to be a tortilla shell, like a soft tortilla. I want it to be a piece of bread. So I need it to be fluffy and not get so flat and dense. I've lost count of how many times I've layered, but I know that I've used a good amount of tissue paper. Fill anything that's going to be dense, like ice cream or like a hamburger bun, fill it with dry toilet paper and give it a layer of damp toilet paper around it instead of just soaking the toilet paper and making one big wet ball of toilet paper. It's just not gonna work. And if you don't let it dry completely, then your paint doesn't work because your paint won't dry. Yes, we are gonna mop on a base coat of paint. And I'm gonna start with my egg. I put on some gloves because I get it all over me. I probably still get it on me with gloves, but you know, at least I tried. So as I was painting this egg, I was using the paint also to be like a glue if some of my layers were wanting to fall apart. And I got into putting paint on both sides, and it's awful. Don't do it. Don't paint the bottom and the top at the same time, you guys. It's not going to work. Watch as I rip this apart. Look, it's sticking to my fingers because the paint is drying. So instead, learn from my mistake and just put a ton of paint on your brush, and like I said, mop that paint on there. Just wipe it on here. I did a much better job with the bread. Both the bread and the bacon have really warm browns in them, so I just used the same color that I had mixed up for the bacon and the bread for their first coats. And then we're gonna need to let these dry again and make sure they're nice and dry. I just let mine dry overnight, and as you can see, they're nice and like firm and almost like a crispy. I really like the way the egg dried because it left these frayed pieces that were much more real than if I had tried to fashion them myself or manipulate it in any kind of way. Just another reason I love this project is because it just incorporates so much problem solving. You have to problem solve and critical think in order to build your pieces. You also have to color match almost perfectly. It's very unforgiving. If your food item is even slightly off, off, it looks dead wrong. Keep that in mind as you go forward. Hey, if you've learned something so far, give this video a thumbs up. If you want more videos and you want to know where to find them and not lose my little channel, then you might want to subscribe, because it is just now starting to grow and maybe kind of hard to find. But I am a certified art teacher, and I do have my master's in secondary education. I've done this project with mostly 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th graders. So a lot of our outcomes are pretty realistic. If you were to do this project with a younger student, please consider making sure that you help them mix color. That seems to be the hardest part for them, is getting that color perfect. Now I'm starting to get the bottom part of the bacon. Remember I said don't paint both sides. The bottom of the bacon, I'm going to use a lot of watered down acrylic, and I did show some of my palette in this shot. You can see where I'm wetting that down so that it soaks into the toilet paper a little bit, in order to hide any little white wrinkles that show through. If I were to just use my acrylic the way it is and not water it down at that stage, then it would rip the toilet paper, because as the acrylic dries, if you don't have that hard coat, that hard shell on there already of dried acrylic, then it will stick to your brush and rip your toilet paper. And my goodness, there's so many reds and browns and warm oranges in this bacon that I completely underestimated. But that is the nature of the project. Remember when I said, if it's easy to sculpt and the bacon was very easy, then it will be most likely difficult to paint. So it will get you one way or the other. Any item that needs to look like it's still wet, we need to put Mod Podge on that's glossy. So I'm gonna do half this donut with Mod Podge and leave the other half alone. And you'll notice that after the Mod Podge is dry, it dries perfectly clear. And the left side of this donut is gonna be matte and the other side is glossy. So let's do that with our egg and both slices of bacon. Since both of those really have a wet or glossy texture, we're gonna apply it to both of those. I'm gonna avoid putting it on the bread because the bread doesn't need to look glossy. If you're adding any sort of like pepper or sesame seeds to a bun, this is the time and the stage of the project where you're gonna wanna do that. When your Mod Podge is still wet, you'll just sprinkle on pepper or sesame seeds or any sort of seasoning, and it will dry clear. Just don't glob it on. Just kind of give it a nice thin layer. I learned this project when I was getting my master's, and I have used it every single year in either painting or sculpture. It works for so many different reasons. If you want to use this for other classes and incorporate it into your curriculum and blend it and use it as a cross-curricular project, I put some notes in the description that could be some ideas for you there. And if you learned something, I hope you'll consider subscribing. Let me show you some of these projects from my students in the past that have turned out well. And don't ever underestimate the effects of some props, which I think always helps sell the project. I always encourage my students, hey, plate it up, make it look nice. Let's really try to get this illusion to work. If you get into this project and you have some questions, just put it in the comments below. I'll try to answer any of those. Every one of these projects were done in my classroom under my watchful eye, but my students just never cease to amaze me. They're so brilliant and endlessly creative, and I appreciate them so much. Thank you guys for joining us, and I hope you have a very blessed day. Enjoy it.